We will be hopefully in person for our May membership meeting in Charleston on May 5th. Hopefully everything goes okay. And we can all be together. It has been over 2 years since we have all been in an in-person meeting. There's your save the date. Save the date, coming soon. I'm gonna get us going. And our first speaker is Lillian Reinhart with Camp Kesem. Camp Kesem offers support, resources, and a week-long camp to children of cancer survivors. Mountains of Hope has been a proud sponsor for many years. We are on their advisory board, and we are also a financial sponsor. So Lillian can take it away.
Hello, so I'll be filling in for Lillian.
Oh, sorry.
No worries at all. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So yes, we are Camp Kesem. If anyone can't see the screen, please let me know. But yeah, so the introduction was fairly accurate. We are a group of student leaders here at West Virginia University who work with a lot of kids in the West Virginia area whose parent or guardian has been impacted by cancer. We are really appreciative for the support and the time today. So let's see.
All right, so the reason Camp Kesem was started is because we know a parent's cancer can affect the entire family and not just the individual with cancer. So a child that has a parent with cancer, it can make them feel isolated from their peers that maybe don't understand what they're going through. It can affect their performance in school. They might not have interest in their social lives, or they might feel like they have to take on adult roles. And so there's this quote here that says, "The greatest gift you can give your child is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them." And that's kind of what Camp Kesem has the opportunity to do, because we give them a whole community of people that understand what they're going through and kind of just gives them the opportunity to be themselves. So Camp Kesem is the largest provider of support services for children impacted by their parents' cancer. So we, as a whole, the national organization serves over 5 million children. And then Kesem's Through and Beyond services, and not just camp, but everything else that we have the opportunity to do serves around 8,000. And everything, all the programming that we do is free to families. So that's pretty cool because we're able to give a free week-long camp. We're able to send packages to them, all this really awesome stuff. And then our goal for JV, specifically our camp, is to serve 45 children at our camp this summer. And then this is just our camp video from 2019, the last time we had in-person camp before COVID. It's a little bit long, so I don't think we have time to watch it, but I would highly recommend for you all to watch it when you have time. I think it does a really great job of just capturing what Kesem is and why it's so special. All right, so our Through and Beyond services, so obviously we have our camp, or Camp Kesem, which is the big thing that we do, the week-long camp that we do that's completely free. And then we have something called Kesem Warm Welcome. So anytime that someone is admitted to come to camp, me and Grant, or the outreach coordinators, get to put together a package to tell them that they've been approved to come to camp and kind of just give them a warm welcome into the Kesem family. So this might look like a certificate and some little like presents. This year our camp theme is Olympics, so we're going to send like medals to them and those types of things. And we have Kesem Friends and Family Day, which happens once in the spring and once in the fall. And that's just a day for families to come and we just hang out with them. We might play games or watch movies, kind of those types of things, just to connect before the summer. And then we have Kesem Connections, so that's just connecting with families regularly, letting them know what's going on with camp or events, those types of things. And then we have Kesem Special Deliveries, which might be birthday cards or thinking about you cards if that's needed. And we have Kesem By Your Side, which is just kind of like customized support for what families really need. And then we have Kesem Online Resources, which are also provided for all Kesem families. All right, and then the majority of this is done by Kesem student leaders and college students. And so I think that's really cool. So as student leaders, we get to recruit and train our counselors and our coordinators that work all year. And then Grant and I get to connect with families. We get to talk to them, see how they're doing, how life is going. And then all student leaders get to fundraise for camp and supporting the chapter and making sure we can make everything free. And then we get to plan and execute camp. And then we also get to deliver year-round services. And then these are just lists of all the Kesem chapters throughout the whole country. So if you know somebody that maybe doesn't live in West Virginia, but would benefit from camps, these are all the different chapters.
All right, so to talk about some of the stuff that we've been up to at least this year and this past year, so we were able to hold our first in-person Friends and Family Day since 2019, which is very excited. The kids had a lot of fun. And so we did play, carnival games and painting and singing the camp songs. But additionally, with the onset of the pandemic, we started Kesem at Home. So that was actually a virtual form of camp over Zoom. And that was a little bit interesting and took some trial and error, transitioning from in-person to obviously virtual, but we still have had a really great turnout, and the kids have all had a lot of fun and had been able to make a lot of connections even through Zoom, which has been really encouraging to see. So here's some pictures from Kesem at Home. So it looks obviously a little different from your traditional summer camp, but it was still very fun, and the kids were able to get a lot of support from not only the counselors, but fellow campers as well. So there's some more things. This is a dance party that we did one evening where they chose fun backgrounds and just went for it. Here's our Friends and Family Day as well. So that's some of the activities we did is, painting and getting to make little pumpkins and things like that. So it's just a lot of activities that allow the kids to not only meet each other, but to have a little bit of fun outside of their normal routine. So how can you help us? So there are fortunately so many ways that you can help Kesem, both financially and non-financially. So one of the first, and I think the most important thing would be family recruitment. So, kind of keeping in mind what families would benefit from our services and offering that as a resource and kind of telling them about that. Unfortunately, we're not able to outreach and connect with every single family that this might impact. So that's your job. That would be where we could get a lot of help, is to find those families that would be benefiting from our services. There are also nurse and mental health professional working groups that will provide guidance on Kesem policies and programming to serve as more of an administrative role and leadership within the higher ups of Kesem, serving on our chapter advisory board, which we know we have some here. So that's basically supporting local chapters and providing a little bit more guidance outside of our programming, funding a new chapter, which is obviously a little more of a financial take on, but helping Kesem grow to serve more children. As you could see, there are a couple states that have some areas that don't have Kesem chapters. So there's always room for growth. Providing nurse and mental health professional support at camp. So if you're a nurse or mental health professional and would like to attend camp, I know Camp Kesem at WVU is thinking about needing a couple of those. So if you are interested, definitely reach out to us and we could definitely hook you up with the right channels to attend camp. And then attending a Kesem event, so we have our Make the Magic event, which is a very, very nice gala at the end of the year in the later spring that helps to fundraise, and we have a silent auction, we have speakers, and it's a really good night to not only support Kesem, but to meet the people involved and meet some of the families as well. And then finally, outreach to other hospitals and oncology centers. Again, just getting our word out more to those channels that would need it the most. And then finally, adding hospital or oncology centers to Kesem family resources and making sure that Kesem is something that's mentioned and something that's known about in oncology and cancer centers as well, just to allow for that, for more talk about Kesem, its programming, and what it might add to families who are impacted by that. So if you have any ways at all to help the mission of Kesem, you can email us at wvu.outreach@kesem.org. Sunny and I, or Alexis, I guess her name is on here. We use our Kesem names, but yeah, so we will be on that email, and we'd love to help work to get Kesem to any families that you may think of. Yeah, so there's our contact information if you need it now, and I'm sure we could get it to you after if you aren't able to get it now.
Here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see this? All right, let me. Okay. So, like Abby said, I'm Vanessa. I am the regional manager for the Northern West Virginia Make-A-Wish office here. Make-A-Wish has been something I've been super passionate about since a young age and giving back to my community. So that is why I went to school to study nonprofit management with the ultimate goal of someday working for Make-A-Wish. And so that is how I got here. I just wanted to point out here, we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, everything. And those are good places to follow us, to see wish stories and what's going on with us, because we're always posting fun wishes that we are working on. So a little bit of background about Make-A-Wish. I'm sure you've all heard of it, but our mission is together we create life-changing wishes for children with critical illnesses. And we've known for a long time through research and studies that we've done that wishes are transformative experiences for our children and their families by creating an opportunity for hope and the ability for a child to experience life beyond their illness. You know, we like to give them the opportunity to just be a kid again and forget about hospital visits and hospital stays and all of that stuff and really bring them back to childhood. And another important component for us is including the family because, you know, their illness, their whole family is involved. So we also like to include the family in the wish experience and just make it, you know, something that they will all remember forever. We found that a wish can help a child replace fear with confidence, anxiety with excitement, and sadness with hope. And we've even seen research that shows that in the year following a child's wish coming true, they experience less hospital visits in that year. They're more willing to comply with their treatment, you know, leading up to their wish because they're so excited for their wish, and then after their wish because they have that renewed sense of hope and excitement back in their life. So the beginning of Make-A-Wish. Our Make-A-Wish was, the idea of it came in 1980 in Phoenix, Arizona, when Chris Gracious was battling leukemia, and he just always was talking about how he wanted to be a police officer and wanted to help his local community. So the local Phoenix community, the fire department, the police department, you know, everybody came together to give Chris a day where he was a police officer for the day. They gave him his own uniform, badge, you know, he got to help fight off bad guys and, you know, all the things that little kids think that police officers do and want to be able to do. So that was, you know, the beginning of Make-A-Wish and what inspired, you know, the last 42 years here at Make-A-Wish. Our local chapter was founded in 1983, and that is how Make-A-Wish is broken up. We're broken up by chapters. So we are the Greater Pennsylvania and West Virginia chapter, which means we serve the entire state of West Virginia and 57 counties in Pennsylvania. And in our first year, we granted only 13 wishes. Our first wish was a wish kid named Brian, and all he wanted was to be able to go to Texas and get a piggyback ride from his favorite uncle that lived in Texas. So that's exactly what we did. We sent him to Texas for a visit with his uncle, and he got that piggyback ride. So like I said, in our first year, we only granted 13 wishes. Now, you know, however many years later, I can't do that math off the top of my head right now. In a normal year, we do about 600 wishes per year. With COVID, we're doing about half of that, which I'll go into in a little bit. But like I said, today we cover 57 counties in Pennsylvania, the entire state of West Virginia. And we have 2 offices here in West Virginia, the one that I'm at here in Morgantown, and then we have another office down in Charleston that covers the southern half of the state. So I'm going to go into the eligibility requirements for a child to receive a wish. So it's very simple. There are only 2 things that can qualify a kid. One is that they have to be between the ages of 2.5 and under the age of 18 when they are referred, and they have to be diagnosed with a critical illness that places their life in jeopardy. We also use the term life-threatening, sort of, you know, people are always like, what's a critical illness? Life-threatening is another phrase we use. That was changed. Our mission statement used to be life-threatening, and in the last 5 years, that changed to critical, just so that we could be more inclusive in the kids that we are granting wishes for. You know, there's new illnesses constantly. Illnesses are constantly changing, so we wanted to make sure that we were getting every child that deserved a wish. And a common misconception is that a child has to be terminal in order to receive a wish. That is not the case. We actually see a very high number of our kids who go on to fight their illness and recover and live, you know, long and prosperous lives. And because of that misconception, we find that families are often very apprehensive to refer their child or to talk with us after a physician refers their child to us, because they don't think their child is sick enough to receive a wish. So, you know, that initial phone call can sometimes be a little scary for a family. So that is something you guys, you know, could really help us with, is getting rid of that misconception and letting people know, you know, your child does not have to be terminal to receive a wish. And something else is that a lot of families think, well, my child's not sick enough, and I don't want to take that wish experience away from another child who may, you know, be sicker than my child or is more deserving of this wish than my child. But that is not the case. Our vision is to grant one wish to every eligible child. And again, that eligibility is just their age and their illness. You know, we don't take financial or anything into consideration. None of that has an effect on whether or not they would qualify. So in the past, we used to have a form that we would send to doctors, and they would determine whether or not their patient qualified for a wish. And a lot of physicians did not like being, you know, the bad guy, as some of them would tell us, and letting us know that, no, this child does not meet the criteria. Also, some doctors, you know, didn't fully understand our criteria. So in May of 2019, we introduced our medical affairs team, and this is a council at our national office in Phoenix, Arizona, made up of medical professionals from around the country, Make-A-Wish board members, and once we receive a referral, we, you know, fill out all the needed questions and get all the information from the child's doctor, and then that goes to our medical advisory team, and they are now the ones that determine whether or not the child meets criteria. These changes were made, you know, to help ensure consistency, and again, to, you know, help take that burden off doctors. And it's also ensuring that the same medical conditions that are qualifying here in West Virginia are the same ones that are qualifying in Wisconsin. So, you know, we're trying to keep everything uniform across all of our chapters across the whole world. So these are conditions that typically qualify. However, this is not an all-inclusive list. Our list is pages and pages and pages. These are just some of the common ones that we see. Cancer diagnoses make up about 30% of the referrals that we receive. But yes, like I said, there are several other conditions that qualify. In regards to cancer, the child does need to require chemo or radiation in order to qualify for a wish. So in order to refer a child, you can submit it online on our website. You can also call us and do it over the phone. We typically receive referrals from social workers or physicians, or the child's medical team in general. Parents can also refer their own children, and we even have kids who will refer themselves to us sometimes if they think, you know, mom and dad and doctor aren't moving quick enough and they want that wish, they will call us themselves or submit it online. Sometimes, you know, it's a little shocking when you call mom and tell them, you know, their 12-year-old referred themselves to Make-A-Wish. But this is another area where we can use help. Is we cannot solicit kids. So if we follow like Facebook pages and things like that, the WVU Kids Cancer Crusaders and things like that. So we see these kids, but we cannot personally reach out to them. So we rely heavily on our healthcare providers and community partners that we work with to refer kids and to, maybe, be the ones to have that initial conversation with the family and encourage them to refer their child. Because we, like I said, we don't want to miss any kids that could potentially qualify for a wish. So now I want to go into the types of wishes that we grant and some ideas behind the wishes. So we have 5 categories of wish types. They are travel, gift, celebrity, occupational, and give back. And most of our wishes pretty much all can fall into one of those categories. Prior to COVID, travel was our #1 requested, wish category, with Disney World being at the top of that travel category. Obviously, with COVID, the last 2 years, we haven't really been able to send kids to Disney or traveling or anything like that. So we're slowly starting to resume travel, which is really exciting. And we've begun that with just some regional travel. So, within 1,000 miles of home, able to drive, we're slowly breaking out because our top priority is obviously keeping our wish kids safe. We would never want to put them in a situation that could put them in danger or, potentially allow them to get sick. But with COVID, we've still been doing so many fun wishes. So first, I think he is so cute. This is Zion, and he is 4 years old. He has sickle cell anemia, and his wish was for a shopping spree. And he specifically wanted to do his shopping spree in one of this little Cadillac car. He wanted to drive around Toys R Us in so that he could, pick out all of his toys in style. And so the Toys R Us employees, before he even got there, the morning of his shopping spree, had put this car together for him so that he just rode around the store and pointed to the things he wanted. And, our volunteers that were with him and Toys R Us staff, they just loaded it into the cart for him, and he didn't even have to get out of his super cool car that he then also got to take home with him at the end of his shopping spree. During COVID, we've also done a lot of online shopping sprees, and that is where a wish kid simply, they'll send us an Amazon wish list, or wherever they're shopping from, they'll send us an email with their wish list. Our wish coordinator, Julia, is amazing. She runs all of our wishes here in our office. And with an online shopping spree, as soon as we get their wish list, she orders it and has it to them, within 2 or 3 days, whatever the shipping time is. So shopping sprees are really fun, and they can be turned around really fast. Puppies were a huge wish during COVID, which I imagine is not a surprise to anybody. Puppy wishes are one of our staff favorites, except it's a little tough sometimes. The puppy hangs out with us in the office all day, and then when it's time to go to the wish kid, we're excited for the wish kid to be getting the puppy, but we're sad that the puppy has to leave our office. And this was Stella. She was 10, and she had a heart transplant, and then she obviously wished for a puppy. Play sets and backyard structures are also a common wish, especially during COVID. We've done things like swing sets. This is Dante, he's 8 with a Wilms tumor, and he wanted his own little playhouse where he could just get away and hang out, on his own or with his friends, have his own little personal space. So we've done a lot of those. We've done art sheds in kids' backyards where they have a space where they can create art and music and things like that. We've done a lot of pools. One that I really thought was neat during COVID was we did an accessible backyard for a little girl up in the northern Panhandle. She was in a wheelchair, and her backyard, she loved being outside and spending time with her family, but their backyard was just not conducive for her to being outside and enjoying time outside with her family. So we put in some accessible walkways in her backyard that her wheelchair could easily, ride around on. We put in a smokeless fire pit because she loved sitting around a fire, but she couldn't inhale the smoke from a normal fire pit. And then we put in a swing that was big enough for her to fit in because their swing set, that was handicapped accessible for her. And then she loved butterflies. So we did butterfly bushes to help attract butterflies in their backyard, and just made it a little oasis where she could enjoy time with her family and enjoy time being outside. And then we also do like car restorations. While we don't grant wishes for motor vehicles or anything like that, we can do restorations and more of like the pimp my ride type of deal. So this was Ford. He's 17. He had a kidney transplant and he wanted to have his truck restored. We did a few of those during COVID, and those ones are always fun, especially because the kids doing those, they tend to be a little older, so they really, really get a vision of what they want, and so those are really fun. We also do, the last type is give back wishes, and these are few and far between, but they're very cool when they happen. So for example, a give back wish, we had a girl who was treated on the pediatric oncology floor, I want to say at Children's Hospital Philadelphia. And so she wanted, our average cost of a wish is $4,400. And so she wanted that $4,400 donated in her name to the pediatric oncology floor at the hospital that treated her and, helped her get better. We've also seen kids wish for new track uniforms for their track team, or football uniforms for their school's football team. We recently did a cool wish in Pittsburgh, out of the Pittsburgh office, for a kid who wanted new football uniforms for his football team, and the Steelers got involved with it, and the Steelers did a whole surprise reveal of these uniforms, and the whole football team was there and got to meet team members from the Steelers. So that was a really neat one. And then we've also seen little kids who wanted to donate just toys to the pediatric floor at the hospital that they're being treated on. So there are a lot of really cool and creative wishes. I think COVID really challenged our wish kids to be creative and sort of think outside of the box, not instantly go into Disney. So it's definitely been an interesting 2 years. Our chapter it's been really exciting. Like I said, our first year in 1983, we granted 13 wishes, and it's a little outdated. 2 weeks ago, not last week, our chapter granted our 20,000th, I think that's how you would say that number, wish to a kiddo up in York County, Pennsylvania. His was an occupational wish, so I wish to be. They're very few and far between, but they are so fun to work on, and it's kind of a throwback to the wish that founded Make-A-Wish. Landon wanted to be a police officer in York, Pennsylvania. He's 8 years old, and he's diagnosed with a Wilms tumor. He is on a very aggressive chemo treatment that causes him great physical pain on most days. But his mom said on the day of the wish, he was awake hours before she was even up. And with the help of our friends at the York County Regional Police Department, Landon had what he described as the best day ever. He was sworn in as the newest police officer to their team, and he was ready to start his new shift. He got to apprehend a criminal, trained with a canine officer, and his wish just sparked pure joy in him all day long. That night after his wish, Landon's mom went in to check on him after he fell asleep, and she found him sleeping in his police hat, police uniform, like he would not take it off, and he was holding on to his badge and his fingerprint evidence in his sleep. So, those are the types of stories that we love to hear, because, you see just how much joy and excitement it brought Landon during this tough time. And after this wish was granted, ABC World News Tonight picked up Landon's wish as a story, which was really exciting for our chapter. And so I wanted to close out my presentation here by sharing with you the video from ABC World News Tonight. I hope you guys can hear this. If you can't, let me know.
So all we can see right now is the screen with him on there.
Oh, no.
With him on there, we can't see the video or hear it.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, I will send the link out then to the video for everybody to watch. It's only like a 2-minute video, but it's super cute. You get to see him, you know, arresting a criminal and all of that fun stuff that he got to do. So I will definitely, I can put that in the chat or send it over to Andy or Abby to send out with your meeting minutes. But that is all that I have for you guys. Thank you so much for having me, and I am happy to answer any questions on here, or if you want to talk, you know, on a more personal level, you can definitely reach out to me through email or over the phone.
So we do have a couple questions in the chat, and as we have done in the last couple meetings, if you have questions, you're welcome to unmute and ask them, or if you want to put them in the chat, we can do that. I'll start with my own question. So mine is for Make-A-Wish. Vanessa, how does the coordination between like the company or the business or the celebrity, how does that work from a logistical and financial aspect?
Yeah, so logistical with celebrities, Julia, like I said, that is our wish coordinator here in our office. So she oversees and plans all the wishes for our office here for Northern West Virginia, and we cover 33 of the counties in West Virginia. So if we got a celebrity wish, our national office in Phoenix, we have a database with, like, you know, celebrities managers and things like that, and our national office more so coordinates that, and then with the celebrities manager and gets us back the details. A lot of times we send our wish kids to the celebrity rather, because, you know, they have such busy schedules. So a few months ago, I want to say it was in December, potentially, we had a wish kid who wanted to meet a YouTube star. I'm not very good with the YouTube stars these days, but and so his team, sometimes it's a super quick turnaround with celebrities. You know, she'd been waiting and waiting, and then his team contacted our national office and said he's got some time in 2 weeks. He'd like her to come out and do a studio tour of his YouTube studio. And so can you guys do it in 2 weeks? So then it's a lot of scrambling, you know, getting back to the Wish family. Hey, are you guys available in 2 weeks to go? You know, we can make this happen in 2 weeks. And that family was, most of the time, they're like, absolutely, let's go. So within 2 weeks, we had them on a plane or driving. I don't remember where exactly they went. And we got her out there. She did a studio tour, and she got to watch him film a couple of his YouTube shows. In regards to if it's more of like a local wish, something happening here in West Virginia, Julia will reach out to them on her own. We have a lot of companies that we already have really great relationships with here locally. Nationally, we also have, you know, partnerships with Macy's, for example, is like a huge national partner of ours. So if we have a wish kid and they want to go on a shopping spree and we're sending them at a mall and there's a Macy's in that mall, we will contact Macy's directly ourselves. And Macy's will typically start the shopping spree out at Macy's. They'll do a huge, you know, welcome for that wish kid that day and sort of, you know, make them feel extra special and sort of like a little celebrity. And, you know, they'll blow it up. There's balloons and, you know, cake, and the staff sometimes will all line up and, you know, do like a little like spirit tunnel when they walk in the store. So it really just depends on the partner and, you know, what we have. We're always looking for and gaining new partners. So it's really, it's wish to wish. Everything varies. You know, no two wishes are the same, even when it's the exact same wish, you know. So yeah, like it just varies.
I have a question, and this one's actually for Camp. Well, it's not really a question. It's actually a question to the group, and it's to help Camp Kesem, because we have such a great diverse group of humans on this call who work in this field. You know, what are some areas or organizations that they should reach out to so they can expand their reach and get more kids to come to camp? So Just kind of, you can throw it in the chat, you can unmute yourself and bring it up, but I think this is a really good opportunity for them to kind of hear from some folks that are across the state and in different areas on where there might be some good outreach.
So what comes to mind immediately is all of the 4-H groups across the state. At least where I'm from, it's very well attended. That might be something that's a lot of kids and a lot of parents are heavily involved.
Does anybody on here have any, I think if you have specific contacts for like, cancer center, social workers, that's a great idea, Stephanie put in the chat. And I know that Grant and Alexis, that was something I think we talked about at one of the meetings recently, is looking at the social worker outreach. There was one more question in the chat, and as you are on the call, as you are thinking of places, if you want to put those in the chat, I'm writing a list down too, and I can get it to the CASM folks through our advisory board list. Another question and actually I think this would apply to both groups. With the pandemic first, if kids that wanted to travel as their wish, were they able to postpone or did they pick alternate wishes? And that might also be a case-by-case basis too, but how did that work, Vanessa?
Yeah, so, we've been very honest and upfront with our wish families from the beginning, especially in we don't know when you're going to be able to travel again. So some of our families or wish kids, decided to pick a new wish. Some of our wish kids were like, yeah, I don't want to wait anymore. I want something. So then they transformed their wish into something else. We did a few programs or, sent paperwork to kind of help them think of ideas and let them know that there were other options. So if they wanted to change it, they could. But we do still have some families that are waiting and they've chosen to wait for the travel to open up and for them to be able to travel. We obviously also work with their medical team and making sure that it is safe for them to continue waiting because, we would hate for something to happen to the child before their wish was able to come true. So if the medical team says that they're okay to wait, then we've been letting them wait. If the medical team kind of pushes that it needs to happen sooner, then we do our best to push to make it happen sooner, but we're obviously, we're not going to force anybody to pick something if they don't want to pick something else. So that's how we've been handling it.
Andy, you used to work in education, so I'm gonna pick your brain for a moment. So in terms of the Camp Kesem recruitment and everything, what if they reached out to the education coordinator at the state level or something like that and maybe promoted it through, I don't know who that would be or what that position looks like, but that's just kind of that's where my brain went.
I think that would be possible to coordinate with the West Virginia Department of Education. And actually, I kind of wrote this down after Stephanie posted about social workers. I'm wondering if the state guidance counselor network would be the place for Kesem to start, because this isn't something I don't know how many of you on here have school-age children, but sometimes I open my kids' folder and it's like an explosion of pamphlets. So I'm wondering if we got in contact with the Guidance Counselors Association, if that would be the place to go. Because I was speaking candidly, when I was diagnosed with cancer, the beginning of the next school year, I reached out to my kids' guidance counselors just to give them a heads up. School nurses too, Anna. Yeah, I'm writing this down. This is great.
Do you have any more questions? No? Okay, if you think of anything, let us know and we will send your questions to the speakers that we've had thus far and get you an answer. We are going to have another quick break for 10 minutes and we're going to come back at 10:50 and hear from our next two speakers. So everyone take 10, get yourself a drink, snack, what have you. Back. Everyone have a nice break? Yes, are we ready to keep going? Had lots of interesting information, ideas. This is a good meeting. So next we are going to hear from Shelley, our chair emeritus, and she's going to give us an update on the oral cancer health rights group. There's a legislative update. Take it away, Shelley.
Okay, so somebody let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, you should be seeing the presenter slide. Are we good?
We're seeing presenter mode, so we can see your notes.
Yay. Okay, so I am Shelley Dusick, the current chair emeritus of Mountains of Hope, and currently leading the cancer-related oral health work group in the Quality of Life Committee. So the coalition membership meeting in January of 2021 focused on cancer survivorship and disability, which included a presentation on oral cancer, the importance of reconstruction for survivors, and the lack of insurance coverage for these services. And this meeting would ultimately serve as the catalyst for the development of the cancer-related oral health work group, which we call ourselves the CROW group for short. With policy, systems, and environmental change as one of the 4 guiding principles of the cancer plan, the coalition established this dedicated work group within the Quality of Life Subcommittee to focus on developing cancer-related oral health policies. As part of this work, the work group has engaged in new partnerships with the WVU School of Dentistry, the WVU Cancer Institute, the West Virginia Oral Health Coalition, Marshall University, rehabilitation specialists, medical and dental billers, cancer survivors, durable medical equipment specialists, oncology state societies, and the National Association for Corporate Health Risk Management Roundtable, and many more. So using the cancer plan as our guide, the CROW work group is acting as a hub, and we function as a place where these new partners have provided education and insight so that we could assess the need and develop a data-driven solution. We ask our partners, how can we address the oral health needs of those living with and beyond cancer to improve their quality of life? The CROW work group decided that in order to meet the oral health and rehabilitative needs of cancer survivors, we wanted dental and oral health providers to be a part of the cancer care team. And we wanted patients to be able to afford the procedures that they need. We discovered that only a handful of cancer centers in the nation are trying to integrate dental and oral providers as part of the cancer team. And all of them identified a lack of insurance coverage for procedures as a barrier. So our partners at WVU Cancer Institute and the WVU School of Dentistry are working together on a systems change, and they began providing oral care clinical services for patients in January of 2022. The main goal of that clinic is to provide comprehensive oral and maxillofacial evaluation of cancer patients before they start any kind of cancer therapy. So these partners will later share best practices through the work group to model the system change for other cancer centers across the state. But to address the insurance coverage, the work group decided to take a policy approach. Currently, oral health and rehabilitative services are rarely covered under traditional medical plans. This results in many West Virginians not receiving the services and support that they need before, during, and after their cancer treatments. And one way to address the problem is to ensure that the services are included in the patient's cancer care or survivorship plan. So by including these services as part of the patient's cancer care or survivorship plan, we can decrease the cost for patients and payers by reducing post-treatment complications, cancer reoccurrence, and other chronic diseases. We can increase overall lifetime earnings of cancer survivors by covering services that allow them to be gainfully employed after treatment, and therefore decreasing their dependency on state services that are related to unemployment. And we can increase access and utilization of services that create better patient outcomes. Our next step was figuring out how we were going to accomplish this goal. So the Crow Group decided to write a policy by adapting language from the bipartisan Federal Women's Health Rights Act of 1998, which set the precedent for providing medical coverage for breast reconstruction when it was related to breast cancer treatment. We also adapted language from the 2021 North Carolina House Bill 646. It's their Dental Care Act, which asks for increased coverage for dental care procedures when they're related to cancer treatment. And our adaptations include a few important phrases. The first of which is part of a patient's cancer care or survivorship plan. This is important because complications from cancer treatment may result in the need for continued oral health or rehabilitative services after treatment ends. By incorporating survivorship plan, this will ensure that any follow-up services would be covered as well. Second is the phrasing, in a manner determined in consultation with the attending healthcare provider in the patient. We firmly believe that a patient's cancer care team, in conjunction with the patient's consent, should determine which services should be part of the cancer care plan. Stating this explicitly in the policy leaves the determination of treatment firmly in the hands of the providers. Third is the phrase, coverage for oral health procedures that are necessary to receive or are the result of cancer treatments. We included this phrasing because some procedures, such as examinations and restorations or extractions, may need to happen before a patient can receive their cancer treatments. For instance, a breast cancer patient who has lymph node involvement in her neck may need radiation to the neck area. And before she can receive that radiation, she may need to have an examination and restoration or extraction to prevent further complications down the road. Additionally, some dental, medical, or rehabilitative health procedures, if she would need help with swallowing, for instance, after that treatment, may not be covered and may be necessary. So by associating these two policies, what we hope to show is how important these services are to restore basic life functions, eating, breathing, voice, speech, and swallowing, while also allowing a survivor the chance to live a life with dignity after treatment. As one of our breast cancer survivors in the coalition so very clearly put it, I can live without my boobs, but I need to eat. Then there's the billing issue. When Kentucky passed the colorectal cancer screening legislation that mandated in Kentucky, screening colonoscopies must be billed as screening, even if polyps are removed during the procedure. They found billing code inconsistencies between payers presented a major barrier to implementation. So learning from their example, we decided to write into the policy a simple and effective billing solution. At first, we wanted to provide a list of covered procedures, but the difference in billing codes for dental, medical, and rehabilitative procedures made creating that list difficult. Additionally, it's really important to leave that decision about the necessary procedures with the care team. So we determined we would not be able to provide a comprehensive and accurate list of billing codes. So we consulted with medical billers and national experts at the ACHRM Oncology Roundtable. We resolved to write in a billing modifier that could be used in conjunction with any applicable billing code. Many rehabilitation and physical therapies are already using billing modifiers, so this capitalizes on an existing practice. In hopes to further simplify things, we'd like that modifier to be the actual bill name. So that way down the road, if a biller Googles the code that they don't know what it means, they'll be able to see this policy and how this policy applies to covering that procedure. This would also allow us to educate providers, medical and dental billers, and insurance companies on a single code that would apply to the policy. With one modifier, this simplifies implementation within billing systems and decreases the burden of change for all parties involved. Very few insurance policies are exempt from the Affordable Care Act, but there are some that have been grandfathered out. We feel that this wording in the policy will make it easier to replicate in other states, as well as at the national level, should this movement gain traction. And there's been a lot of interest. The results we expect this policy to have are to decrease costs for patients and payers by reducing post-treatment complications. We found some fantastic information about how that can happen with post-operative pneumonia prevention in lung cancer patients. And by doing these rehabilitation, we can reduce modifiable risk factors for chronic disease as well. We want to increase the overall lifetime earnings of cancer survivors by covering services that allow them to be gainfully employed. Post-treatment disability is a big problem for a lot of cancer survivors. And by giving them access and affordability to these services, we hope to decrease the dependency on state services that are related to unemployment. And we want to increase utilization and access to services that create better patient outcomes. So where are we now? Our partners with the West Virginia Oral Health Coalition reached out to legislators this session to see if there was interest in championing this bill. 2 champions have been identified. Taking the lead with the bill is Senator Tom Takubo, who is the majority leader in the Senate, and Delegate Amy Summers, who is the majority leader in the House. In talking with our legislative champions and their staff, we discovered that we need further data on the economic impact of the bill. This information will prove helpful and provide insight for the creation of the fiscal note, which explains how the bill will impact the state budget. In order to give the Crow Work Group enough time to add this data to our white paper, we've asked Senator Takubo to make the Oral Health and Cancer Rights Act a Senate priority for a year of study. That request has been put into language and sent to the clerk for a bill number. Legislative staff anticipate that the study request will be granted, and the Crow Group is going to continue to monitor the progress of this request and be available to answer questions. Our next steps include adding the economic impact data to the white paper and the advocacy toolkit, and we hope to have this ready for our in-person meeting in May. We want to continue to work with our legislative champions and their staff in the off-season so that we can prepare for pushing this bill through on the 2023 session. And we want to take that extra time that we've been given to educate Mountains of Hope members, partners, and the public about how to use the advocacy toolkit and to build support for the bill in anticipation of the next legislative session. This policy change to address the oral health and rehabilitative needs of those living with and beyond cancer is a significant step to save money, improve patient outcomes, prevent chronic disease, and improve the quality of life for cancer patients and survivors. Following the successful precedent set by the Women's Health and Cancer Rights Act of 1998, we hope that this legislation will pioneer a path that leads West Virginia toward a healthier and more equitable future. And I'm happy to take questions.
Let's hold questions until the very end.
Okay.
So we're a tiny bit behind. Next up, we have childhood cancer survivor and newer member to the coalition, Julie. I think Julie's been with us for like 6 months. She can correct me if I'm wrong. Julie Shooter is a member of the Quality of Life Subcommittee. She is a volunteer with our coalition. She is a 37-year Ewing sarcoma cancer survivor. Julie has a master's degree in nonprofit management and philanthropy and a bachelor's degree in business administration with a focus on strategic human resource management. Prior to becoming disabled, Julie was an officer with Wells Fargo Advisors and spent over 30 years in the banking and brokerage industry. Julie has been a lifelong volunteer with organizations such as the American Cancer Society, Make-A-Wish Foundation, Mercy Housing, Habitat for Humanity, and the United Way. She enjoys spending her time with her family and friends, especially her daughter and granddaughter, cooking, reading music, and doing random acts of kindness. Julie, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks so much for having me and asking me to speak. When Andy and I have talked many times, and she's like, hey, do you want to talk and share your story? And I said, sure. So there are no slides because I can just chat forever, and I'm going to condense this. So yes, when I was a teenager, I started getting this pain in my right leg and didn't know what it was. went through a lot of doctors. And at first they said it was growing pains. Then they said I was too athletic. Cut to my dad and I were playing Frisbee one day and he tore some ligaments in his leg. And he said, you know, why don't I take you to my orthopedic surgeon just to see what he thinks? Because at that time I could barely walk on my leg. And I went to the orthopedic surgeon. There was a tumor the size of half of a grapefruit on my femur. It was a Friday. He sent me to Boston because I lived in Massachusetts at the time. I had a biopsy on Monday. They told me on Wednesday that I had a rare form of bone cancer. That's what Ewing sarcoma is. Currently, Ewing sarcoma represents 1% of all children under the age of 15 and only 2% of teenagers from the age of 15 to 19. So at that time, 37 years ago, I had a biopsy, I had chemo, and then I had what they are calling radical radiation. And it's important that I say radical radiation because I went 30 years on my very fragile leg and everything was fine. And almost 8 years ago now, I was walking down the stairs and my leg broke almost all the way across from the radical radiation that I had. And I'll never forget being in Boston and my surgeon coming in on a Sunday night to tell me that he knew that I was here and we're going to figure out what was wrong. And he said it's either one of two things. It's either wear and tear on a fragile leg or it's radiation-induced sarcoma, which I had never heard of. And he said radiation-induced sarcoma comes on set 30 years after a person has radiation. So thankfully for me, it was not radiation-induced sarcoma. It was just wear and tear on a fragile leg. But since breaking my leg almost 8 years ago, I just had my 28th surgery. What happened was they originally put rods and screws in my leg to fix the break. And a month after coming home from the hospital, I developed pressure sores on my heel because I had a blockage in my leg that went undetected. So to make a very long story short, we discovered I had peripheral vascular disease, which is a circulation disorder. And after so many surgeries, I developed lymphedema, which that's when the vessels can't drain the fluid and you have a lot of swelling in your leg. So at one point I had a hole in my foot. You could see through my foot. I had a wound vac on. I had a PICC line. I've actually had 2 wound vacs, 2 PICC lines. I was homebound for an entire year where I couldn't let my foot down longer than 15 minutes. So I like to say that I prepared for the pandemic because I had to sit at home back in 2015 for a year without being able to do much. But through all of these surgeries, one being a free flap surgery where they took a muscle and a vessel from my right leg and attached it to my foot. It was an 8-hour procedure. And after that surgery, I developed a clot at the end of the flap, which you never want to hear if you have a flap surgery. So I had to go back in for emergency surgery. I lost 3.5 liters of blood. I needed 12 transfusions, one after the other, which is called a massive transfusion. And I didn't know it at the time, but from that specific surgery, I developed PTSD, which I didn't discover until I actually moved here a few years later. I was finishing my degree and I had 2 weeks off. And during that 2 weeks, I just started crying all the time. And I was thinking, am I going crazy? Like, what is happening here? But my brain had the time to kind of process. At that time, I had had 20 surgeries, what had happened. So I found a really good therapist here in town who is amazing. And we've been working with EMDR therapy, which is heavy duty therapy where you have to process all of the trauma that you've gone through because our brains are like filing cabinets. And when a trauma happens, if you don't process it, it gets filed away. And then, like me, having quiet time, everything kind of came to the surface. And, it's just, it's been a lot. I went from being on no medication to now I'm on blood thinners, I'm on aspirin. I have 2 stents in my legs, which I just had vascular surgery January 18th, which every 12 to 14 months, I need maintenance on these stents to keep them open and the blood flowing. But what I've discovered through this entire process is obviously cancer sucks, but there's a lot of things that happen after you have your treatment and a lot of things you're not aware of, but you have to be resilient. You have to be your own advocate. One example of that is I had just come home from my surgery, my initial surgery, and my daughter had to go to CVS to get a prescription for the blood thinner. And I worked for a wonderful company, had really good insurance. And she called me from CVS and she said, Mom, it's $675 for your script. I was like, what? I have private health insurance. And after going back and forth with their insurance company, they didn't like the specific blood thinner that they put me on. They wanted me on just the regular Coumadin, which I couldn't take because my veins were shutting down from all of the blood that the blood work that I needed. So you really have to fight for yourself and advocate for yourself, which is what I did. And then also, I was sitting there one day thinking, so they dropped the price from $675 to $75. And then I was sitting at home one day because I was out on leave for 3 months. And I was thinking, who's the manufacturer of this drug? So I found out who the manufacturer was. I contacted them and they said, yes, we have a savings discount card on our website where if you print out this savings discount card, it'll only cost you $10 a month. But these are things that you don't know about. So I think, you have to be your own advocate. You have to share the information that you learn. I used to have a blog that I did, but I can't write on demand. And I was finishing my master's degree, so I don't have it, but I share it all the time on my Facebook page and, with everyone that I can. Because you know what, there's a lot of things that happen after you have cancer that people don't know about. So if I can, share my story, and there's a lot more to it, but I don't want to bore you guys. If I could share my story and just help one person, I think it's worth it, because when you are going through chemo, it's a lot. When you're going through radiation, it's a lot. And then everything after, lymphedema, I go to lymphedema therapy once a week. It's super frustrating that insurance does not recognize lymphedema or the garments. No garments are covered with insurance, which is an issue. So I think there needs to be more communication between the healthcare agencies and just a better understanding that lymphedema is something that needs to be addressed. The policies need to be changed. I have the best lymphedema therapist at WVU. She's amazing. But yeah, so that's pretty much my story. There's a lot more to it, but if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Julie. We're going to hold questions till the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our final speaker, Dr. Mohammed Badawi. He can correct me. I've been practicing saying it and it's phonetic, but I'm still struggling, as you can hear. He is a pediatric hematology oncology specialist and started his pediatric residency at CAMC Women and Children's Hospital, and then went to Northwell Health in New York City for his oncology training. He joined West Virginia University Charleston Division in July 2017 and reestablished the pediatric survivorship program there. Along with the pediatric cancer survivorship team, he is striving to deliver the best care possible to pediatric cancer survivors. Thank you, Dr. Badwai.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you, Julie, for sharing your story. I mean, it's always, I mean, we hear a lot about these side effects. We teach them, but we don't see them in the pediatric world. So thank you for the eye opener. So today I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna try to share my screen. I always have problems when I do share my screen because I have two monitors. But let me see. Let's see if it goes. Thank you. Do you see presenter view or the actual slide? I think now it should be okay. Do you see the actual slide?
Yeah, we see your actual slide.
Good, excellent, perfect. So today I'm going to talk about taking care of childhood cancer survivors. The objective for today's talk is I'm going to give you an update on the childhood cancer survivorship, the potential side effects of what we do for the treatment, whether it's going to be chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and then at the end, I'm going to finish on how we care of this patient population. So I'm going to start with a case. I'm going to make this case follow us throughout through the presentation and see how it evolves throughout the information that we're going to accumulate about cancer survivorship. So this is Jonathan. He's an 8-year-old. He just came to the primary care clinic. He had a history of neuroblastoma when he was 18 months. So it has been now 6 years since completion of therapy. He was treated with chemotherapy, autologous stem cell transplant. High-risk neuroblastoma is usually pretty heavy chemotherapy that needed to be for the treatment. He has been in remission for 6 years, 5 years. Today, he has no complaint. He looks like any other kid in a room. Up to date with immunization, mom has no complaint. So how should we deal with this patient? Should we really consider him now that the tumor risk to come back is kind of small? Should we treat him like anybody else, or do we have to do more for such patient population? And that's what we're going to try to go through. So let's start with the update where we are on childhood cancer survivorship. So to understand where we are, we have to go all the way back. A little bit in history. 1948, first time we treat patients with chemotherapy. So, for example, surgery has been there for the past, 2,000 years to take care of tumors and take it out, obviously with some degree of cure. But radiation has been there for more than 100 years. But chemotherapy is relatively new. It's all started again in 1948. Sidney Farber and Boston Children had a friend who had also a chemotherapeutic agent called amifampridine. Kind of grandfather of the methotrexate. Anyways, so they said that was the first time they said, let's try a medicine and see if that medicine will cure cancer or not. It has a good idea. It has an anti-folate, so it's usually prevents cells from dividing and potentially killing cells. And they were debating on which is the best cancer to try the medicine on. And they decided to go on leukemias. So pediatric leukemias were the first cancer that they ever received chemotherapy. And that was a good choice because it's easy to monitor response. In leukemia, usually you have a very high white cells or abnormal cells in the CBC and the peripheral blood. We give a treatment and monitor response and see if we are doing well or not. And for the first time in history, all these kids that they used to go into Boston Children's and actually die in a week or a few after a presentation in Boston Children's, they almost all achieved remission. They were all kind of back to playing, eating, drinking, and back to be discharged. However, and unfortunately, obviously, all these patients came back with relapses. And eventually, and again, unfortunately, all these patients died at that point. But we learned from that point, that we can use a medicine, chemotherapy, to treat cancer. And the treatment for leukemias remained kind of dismal till the 1980s or so, right? Actually, 1970s were below 10%. But what they did at that point is they keep adding more medications, so more chemotherapeutic agents, adding more radiation, because all these patients who relapsed actually relapsed with CNS disease. So leukemia came back to the brain and the spinal cord. So they have to give him a radiation to the brain and the spinal cord to kill all these leukemic cells. And keep adding and modifying and adding and modifying the treatment till they finally managed to achieve, basically the radiation to the brain actually achieved decent survivor rate, and the survivor went down up from 0%, 10% up to 60%. And since the 1970s, again, we keep on modifying our our treatment agencies to be more effective, less toxic, obviously, to achieve a higher cure rate. And now in 2022, this is up to 2009. Now in 2022, for acute lymphoblastic leukemia, for example, we are around like 90, maybe like definitely above 80% survival rate, but most of them are above 90. And we are achieving better and better, obviously, cure rate. If you're asking, is cancer getting higher in incidence every year? And to be honest, the answer is yes, right? I'm mainly talking about pediatric cancers. That may not apply for adults, but the pediatric cancers incidence has been increasing by 0.7% every year since 1975. A part of its real increase, right? But the other part is a better detection of the cancer. So for example, in the 1980s, there was more use of the CT scans. Here you can see this is a brain tumor, here the red line. So brain line incidence has been increased significantly in the 80s, and that's mainly because of better detection, and kind of flatlined since. Leukemia has been, the black line has been steadily increased over years, and some tumors are basically the same incidence. But if we put them all together, pediatric cancer has been increasing by 0.7% every year. However, death rate has been decreasing on the other end, right? So it has been decreasing by 2.1% every year. You can see leukemia line, the black line is dropping down, same thing for the brain tumors, and we're doing better with almost all other tumors. West Virginia Cancer Burden Report gets published every year. It's usually 2 years behind just because they need a couple of years to collect the data and process the data. So the most recent one is the 2019 one. And if you look at the incidence of pediatric cancers in the state of West Virginia, 178 cases every 5 years per million, I'm sorry. It's pretty close to the national average of 188.7 per year, per million. We have around 381 case every 5 years compared to 77,000 in the whole United States. This is per 5 years. So usually the incidence of pediatric cancers are 15,000 cases per year, right? 15,000 cases per year is way less to an adult cancer. 250,000 breast cancer, to my knowledge, per year in the United States, which like put the whole pediatric cancer like 5%, 10% of the breast cancer only, not talking about other cancers. So it's a rare disease. And accordingly, we are a little bit behind, obviously, in research and funds and stuff like that compared to adult cancers. But overall, our patients are doing better. So if we, again, one more time, so if we go back to Jonathan, our patient, so if he's to be treated in the 1970s, the cure rate was only up to 54%. In 2009, 80%. And now these are the most recent data from last year, from the SEER study and review, I mean, and now it's around like, again, 82% cure rate. So we're doing, this is good news for Jonathan. He was born in the 2000, I don't know, like 14 compared to the 70s. So we are achieving way better cure rate than what we used to do back 30 years ago. So now let's dive more into survivorship, right? So we're curing our patients, right? And accordingly, we're having higher numbers of survivors. So back in the 1970s, the United States only had 3.8 million survivors at that point. In 2015, that number increased to 15.5 million cancer survivor, and it's projected to be 26 million by 2040. It's putting a little bit, I think, like, for example, cancer institutes, mainly on the adult side, they're working harder on trying to cover all these patients, especially that if you look at the patient population, from all this 26 million, you can only, there's going to be maybe 6 million only at below the age of 50, right? And all these patients above usually the age of 50, which obviously have more health issues that we're going to get to in a few minutes. So we're doing a better job in treating cancer, right? And accordingly, we're having obviously more cancer survivors. So let's talk about morbidities. We know that these pediatric cancer survivors are at more risk of having secondary cancers, cardiac damage, pulmonary toxicity, sexual dysfunction, learning difficulties, infertility, and more issues that eventually may actually could lead to mortality by themselves, right? So that's also has been seen early in the 1970s, right? They said, even with the small success rate that they have at that point, they realized that, hey, we're curing cancers with heavy toxic treatment, whether it's going to be chemotherapy or radiotherapy. But that means we are introducing more chronically ill individuals to the future society. So cure itself is definitely not enough. It's definitely not enough for this patient population, because we are going to see more issues to come in the future. So these are two of the largest study been done. This is in Boston, done on 10,397 survivors. They followed the survivors for a mean of 26 years, anywhere between 18 and 48. And basically what they found is 30%, like 27.5, but let's say it's 30% of the pediatric cancer survivors will have at least one severe or life-threatening medical condition related to the chemotherapy they had or the treatment they had. So 1/3 of the patients that we treat will have at least one severe or life-threatening medical condition related to the chemotherapy they had. That usually happens around 30 years after the completion of treatment. So the patient was treated at the age of 8. At the age of 38, which is still a young adult, right? There's a 30% chance of having a severe. In St. Jude study, right? Oh, sorry, we're still not there. So they compared the survivors to their own siblings, right? And there's a higher rate of having more than one health condition, severe health condition, 37% compared to 13% in the sibling. More than 3 health conditions, 23% of these patients, like 1/4 will have more than 3 medical conditions, compared to only 5.4% on the survivor sibling. So this is a big difference. If we look also at the how they do in school, so there's a lower risk, did not complete high school. 11% of the pediatric cancer survivors did not complete high school, compared to 6%. And their siblings. All these data were clinically significant. Accordingly, right, the cancer survivor population did do worse in income-wise. So 22% of the population of the cancer survivor studied cancer survivor population made less than $20,000 per year. That's almost double the number of their siblings. And accordingly, they have a higher risk of not having health insurance in adulthood. So we are basically curing cancer, but unfortunately introducing a population that will make less and also have a risk of not having health insurance, despite the high risk of issues they could have in the future. Very similar results in St. Jude lifetime cohort study. Basically, you're saying around 30% chance of having severe life-threatening medical condition, 30 years after completion of treatment, 50 years after the completion of treatment, or the age of 50 years, there's a 96% chance of having at least one severe or life-threatening medical condition related to treatment the patient had. And these are basically, the colors are different kind of like issues with our secondary neoplasm, cardiovascular problems. So they come on the top, and these are the type of the tumors. So we say that they're having more issues, like more medical issues for the next 30 or 50 years after treatment, for the following 30 or 50 years. But is that really reflecting on mortality? And the answer is unfortunately yes. So if we looked at the death rate on the normal population, normal US population in yellow, followed for the same period of time of pediatric cancer survivors, 30 years after the complete treatment, the like mortality rate, I'm sorry, this is the yeah, it's going to be like 99% of the population will be alive 30 years later. Compared to the pediatric cancer survivors, only around 80% of the survivors will be alive at that point. And if we do see what is the real cause of death, the blue line is the recurrence of the tumor or progression of the tumor. That's mainly the main lead cause of death in the first 15 years after the completion of treatment, right? But the yellow line, these are the side effects, the morbidities from the treatment start to creep up from like early after completion of therapy, peaks way faster, right? I mean, after 15 years, and to be the main cause of death 30 years after the completion of treatment. The gray line is dying from external causes like car accidents and stuff like that. So we're having more morbidities, and unfortunately, it's also translated to more mortality in this patient population. Quickly, for the sake of time, compared, I mean, Caucasians to African Americans and Hispanic, the Caucasians are doing a little bit better, right? It's not really a lot of significance, but a little bit better than Hispanic and African American in the United States. So more morbidities, that's not only physical, there's a lot of issues into cognitive, behavioral, and academic functioning also in this patient population. As we said, unemployment, I think 1 out of 6 of the cancer survivors do have a problem with employment when they enter adulthood. That's not only hits the individual itself, but also hit the family altogether. This is more a Swedish studies, not done in the United States, but kind of there's similar data here. Usually when a kid is diagnosed with a cancer, one of the parents, if they both are working, at least have to leave a job to take care of the sick child. Because as you all know, I mean, the treatment is usually long. It's usually at least 6 months, at least, but it's usually take years. So one of the parents, usually they have to quit job to stay with the kid. Usually in the study is the mother. The income of the family will drop, and by the time the therapy is done and the follow-ups are done, it's very hard usually for that individual to go back on the job market and leave a permanent burden on the families of cancer survivors. So one more time, compared to their siblings, cancer survivors did worse in almost all domains. So in general health, they did worse. In functional impairment, they have more, and the activity limitation, they do have more. And if we look at these type of side effects, so we can see cardiomyopathy is on top of the line, arrhythmias of the heart, osteoporosis, weakening of the bone, premature menopause in females, pretty common, erectile dysfunction, strokes, hearing loss. These are not diseases really of young adults. It's not like a 38-year-old diseases. It's more of an old age diseases that's happening to our patient population. So we think with the chemotherapy that we give or radiation that we give, we're accelerating aging among our cancer survivors. This is a very famous study. There's multiple studies also looking at the arteries of the patients of cancer survivors and showing signs of aging inside those arteries. But this is the age, right, and the time that we all have, and this is our cell molecular integrity. So how much our cells can, for example, multiply and stay young and like help with the organ function. So this is everybody's line, right? So we all start with very brand new cells, excellent DNA that will decline over time till we all, unfortunately, will hit a place that there is no recurrence. But when we give treatment for cancer, whether it's going to be chemotherapy or radiation, this line, right, this declining line of us molecular integrity it goes down sharply, right? Causing more frailty and accelerating aging. So we do see this in our patient population after chemotherapy treatment, and unfortunately may cause to increase mortality. So we say that's great time for Jonathan to be treated at, but we make it pretty black picture after, because I mean there's a lot of risk of having issues after completion of treatment. That's where the caring of childhood cancer survivor come from. So most of the data presented is reflecting a old treatment, right? The treatment has been done 30 years ago or 50 years ago, depends on what we saw. We now learned is, as we said, it's not the mortality, what do you call it? The cure is not really enough. It's not really, we have to work on making these patients only go through the cancer, but also we have to really take care of them after, modify our treatment to be less toxic. And maybe not a very big issue in adult cancers, right? Because the expected, like usually cancer in adults, usually again, it happens in older age. No one is expecting the patient to live for another 50 years, for example. It's not as, at least not equally as important in pediatrics. So that's why a lot of our treatments has been modified to be less toxic for the future. So modification of treatment is one, but also published by the Institute of Medicine that we, back in 2003, in National Academy of Science, these patient population, we have to put more light on it, right? The one who is going to take care of this patient population should identify late effects specifically to the treatment they had in the past, be able to review the prior history and treatments and make a perfect plan to screen for these potential long-term side effects, detect them early and fix them early, right? Because the earlier we can find it, so we have, for example, if we do have signs of, let's say, osteoporosis, right, early in life, kind of because of the use of steroids, that's pretty common to use during cancer treatment. Then if we fix it early, well, the patients may be able to live with healthy bones for a long period of time. But if the patient passed, for example, the age of 18 or 20, and still the bone health is pretty bad at that point, then the window is closed, and this is the bone the patient is going to live with for the rest of their life, and that's going to keep declining as we saw over time. And then instead of having weak bone at the age of 80 or 90, we're having weak bones at the age of 50 or 40, and then we're having consequently a lot of issues that will follow. Usually once you have a medical issue, it's not like by itself. You'll have one and then everything like fall apart right after, because also these patients do not have a lot of reserve, because the kidneys had got injured a little bit, the lungs got injured a little bit from the chemotherapy, and the liver also get injured. So these teeny tiny injuries that the body got throughout the treatment will make the patient also more fragile in the future. So we have to evaluate the symptoms, develop a plan for long-term surveillance. That's very important, that each patient, each pediatric cancer survivor has what we call a survivorship care plan that will say in details what are the screenings this patient should have and how we're going to treat if it happens. These are usually individualized plans, depends on the therapy the patient receives. We should also have to coordinate specialists, should be all available, and provide psychological support, educational support, because a lot of patients that struggle in the schools. So we have to really push hard to get what they need, so to be able to go back to normal and not suffer from a lot of consequences. We also have to educate other professionals, so other primary care providers, for example, that this patient population is not like anybody else, and it should be treated special. It depends on the treatment they had, and conduct research also on this patient population and see how we can keep modifying, for example, our treatments and measure prevalence for late effects and fixing these late effects. So it usually takes the whole team. It's not one person job in survivorship usually. So it's a primary care physician, an oncologist who usually provide the survivorship care plan. Psychologist should be in a team, a social worker to see what's available around as a support for this patient population, a dietitian, because a lot of time we have issues with either underweight or overweight, and regardless, it's not healthy. And also access to other subspecialties around to help this patient population. There's multiple guidelines published to how to take care of this patient population. We do follow the Children Oncology Group. This is widely adopted in the United States. And again, it's treatment specific. So each patient will have a different plan than other, mainly depends on the chemotherapy and radiation they received, and will say in details how this patient should be treated and followed. So for example, Jonathan, he did look like anybody else, any other kid on his primary care physician clinic. But if we looked at what he really received in the past, and we look at what he needs, so he needed a yearly physical exam, a yearly dental check, kind of like anybody else. But he also needed yearly counseling on sexual dysfunction and fertility. He received tons of cyclophosphamide as a part of the neuroblastoma treatment. His cumulative dose was 19 grams. You usually are infertile once you pass 7 grams per meter square. Actually, prepubertal females maybe 4. So this 19.4 is way higher than 4 and 7. So, and very high risk of infertility in the future, and also other consequences with the hormones and stuff like that. Counseling for tumor relapse, secondary malignancies, because patients receive topside. Bladder malignancy because the patient receives cyclophosphamide. These patients has to be referred for a psychologist. He had some sleep issues. School, make sure that school performance is actually going up the way it should be. Again, remember that these patients spend a good amount of their development in a hospital, especially for example, in neuroblastoma. There's tons of admissions. You're admitted for like a year or so in a hospital, obviously on and off, and you're sick for maybe another year. Then you really miss a good amount of school on a very critical age. And you don't only miss school, you miss also like brain development that comes with it, the challenges that comes with the school. And when you go back, there's always a problem with adjustment because your friends that now they're a friend with somebody else, right? The classes are way harder than they used to be. So it's also another struggle when we try to go back. So we need to provide support for, again, all of this. Talk to the principal, talk to the school. I mean, they're all understanding. I mean, obviously, when the patient is diagnosed with cancer, but we definitely have to advocate for this patient population and try to give them the best service available. So they need to check their kidney function and liver function for 10 years at least after completion of treatment. We have to check for the hormones that comes with puberty. We got to be affected. These patients should get echocardiogram every 2 years because they receive a high dose of anthracycline and accordingly heart damage. Pulmonary function test because they receive busulfan, which damages the lungs. They need thyroid function, and they need to eye exam every year because of the risk of cataract. So take home, I don't want to make it too bad here. I mean, the cancer survivors, again, they're in general, they're doing great. Still like a high number of patients, they don't actually have much of side effects, but there's definitely they're a higher risk, right? So we're doing way better in treatment, right? We are working to do way better job on the on survivor, decreasing morbidities, modifying the treatments, and hopefully all these numbers of long-term side effects will decrease significantly. I mean, we're already seeing some improvements, but we want it to decrease significantly for the future treatment. So basically that's all what I have. And I'm happy to answer any question.
We did have a couple questions in the chat that we'll start with. I think all of us are in shock. I personally just had no idea those statistics. I'm just blown away by it. I think the one for me that was the most shocking is the effect on the parents, the mother's income gap of children with cancer. I guess my question would be, do you have any information? What does that look like in the long term? Because I would imagine that that continues with a lot of children past the age of 18. So what does the caregiver aspect look like for that?
So there's not a lot of, so when I did the, let me see, there's not a lot of data in studies in the United States about the income per se, right? But we think it's pretty similar to what has been done in Sweden. Usually it will have a long-term impact, right? It definitely depends on the geographical area. Most of the time, again, the mom will lose her job and find it very hard to go back to workforce. Again, it's usually years past since the mom, for example, left her job. To go back, it's pretty challenging for a lot of reasons, as you can imagine, right? And especially these patients, as we said, it's a lot of time they need a long-term care, right? So you treat, let's say, for a year, and then there's another year with tons of scans and follow-ups and kids adjustment to school, be able to go to school this day, can't go to school the other day because of fatigue, whatever it is, right? So it's usually take the mom a few years. When you go back, you know how challenging the workforce anyways. So we lost some skills. And again, it depends on where are you and what job market you're looking at, but usually it will leave a long-term impact on the family income for sure. But how much of an income like loss we have, I don't have like specific data.
I have to admit, this brings up the concerns about generational poverty. So, you know, what happens when the parents are losing resources and then the child grows up and needs all these extra services, but they have lower incomes, they're not as employable, and then they're trying to move ahead. You know, once we see that, and we have so many cancers that are hereditary, so how that's going to affect generational poverty is going to be really salient for West Virginia, I think.
But again, if it, like in general, right, if you look at least at the data, and these data are different between different states. For example, the first one compared to their siblings, this was a Boston data, right? So from their cancer, there's definitely a different kind of population from, for example, here in West Virginia. But on that study, I have to remember the numbers. I can't go back on a slide, but maybe like 20% around 20% of the population did not really were unemployed after the completion of after entering adulthood, compared to like 11% on their siblings, something like that, right? Which is definitely a high number, but it could be way higher in different states. So how much, but still more than 80% of the cancer survivors are back to work first, back to like making income, and they are doing do have health insurance. And also that West data is an income is below 20,000. So I mean, it's still a very low number, obviously, if you're talking about poverty. But yes, I mean, definitely there's challenges. And I know we do keep following the survivors till they decide to move out of the pediatrics. So we have a lot of patients on the, I think the oldest we have is a 37-year-old here in our clinic, and a pediatric, in the pediatric survivorship clinic. Maybe we have plenty, like yesterday, so a 27-year-old. So we have plenty entering the force. We do see some that they're still on their parents' health insurance somehow, but we do see the majority that they kind of, hey, did well pass through the whole thing. Now we're working and now generating income and having kids and doing okay. Still, the vast majority of the patients are the survivors are doing pretty well, but still, I mean, definitely they're at risk, right? This is what I'm saying. I don't want to get the picture that everybody is doing pretty bad. Actually, most of the survivors are doing great, but they're all at risk of having either health issues or like income issues or psychological issues and stuff like that.
We had a question in the chat. Do children who were treated, for example, 30 years ago, do they get the information that they should be getting screenings and need specialty follow-up? Like, what does their long-term patient
They should,
education?
right? So they really should. I'm not sure. So what happened is, like, for example, when I joined here in 2017, we did a study on our patient population. So we had all the patients that get diagnosed from 2004, right? 2004 till now. And we try to call every single patient, right? Obviously, the ones who are not in follow-up anymore. Those patients may have actually moved out of state, may have like lost follow-up for whatever reason. So all the patients are not following up with us. We try to call every single one and try to identify why they're not coming for the survivorship visits. And the clinically significant factor was unaware that they should actually do follow up with with survivorship. The ones who have been treated a long time ago, they did say that, hey, we're not aware that we should do that, right? However, at least to my knowledge, again, most of these patients should have been told treatment is done, right? But you still have to be seen at least annually, once a year, just to screen for these potential side effects.
Question for Julie. After you're listening to Dr. Badawi's talk, do you have any reflections you'd like to share? We kind of married all the worlds today, and it worked out even better than I anticipated. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's funny because I was listening to him and I'm thinking, this is what happened to me. It was 30 years after I had chemo and radiation and, broke my leg, and everything else kind of snowballed. Peripheral vascular disease, lymphedema, which it all ties together. But did I know that 30 years ago before I broke my leg? No, I had follow-ups, and so it was just very interesting to listen and to see all of your data. When I was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, it was 1984. My doctor, and I was at Boston Children's Hospital, amazing doctors. But back then, they would say, if you're lucky, you'll live. If you're not, I mean, it was very difficult as a teenager to go through that. And, my oncologist, who I adore and had finally retired, came to see me when I broke my leg and said, and he used to always say to me, you're my biggest pain in the ass, because as a teenager, I would always say to him, talk to me, tell me the information. And I was always a knowledge seeker. So I would always question, like, we had to change my chemo regimen. It wasn't working for me. And I had to get rid of my first oncologist. We just did not hit it off. So when I got this oncologist, who was amazing, he would always say to me, oh my God, you're such a pain in my butt. And so when I broke my leg almost 8 years ago, he came to the hospital and he said, so here you are, my biggest pain in the butt. And, and he just said, let's see what we can do. But it is really, it's interesting because I'm sure everyone is different, yet so many things can be the same. You know what I mean? And it's just amazing to me. I had cancer 37 years ago, and while advancements obviously have been made, and I'm hopeful in science, it's just so sad that so many people still die of all these cancers: glioblastoma, Ewing sarcoma, osteosarcoma, breast cancer. I mean, the list is on and on. But, thank you for the work that you do. I'm sure you are a very busy doctor, unfortunately, but, we need people like you doing the work that you do. So I thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you so much. And again, it's your story also changed kind of the tone of my lecture, because again, we teach it, we know the data, but we don't usually see it that often, because it's we don't usually, like, we don't have a lot of patients that has been there for at least 30 years. But also to comment on that, do they know? The thing is, when the patients usually get diagnosed with cancer, is that definitely everybody's focus is on the diagnosis and on the treatment. Usually there is what we call a day one talk. I don't know if you remember that. But usually day one, we sit with the patient, sit with the parents, say, hey, this is what we have. We have Ewing sarcoma. This is how we're going to treat it. And this is the list of potential side effects that will happen. And it's like this long, right? It's short-term side effects, so nausea or vomiting or whatever, or a long-term side effect. Usually, however, after the word cancer, right, whatever it is, after the word Ewing sarcoma, the parents they need tons of time to process, but we need to tell them all these information because we need to start treatment quickly. It's a little bit different than adults. For example, I don't know why in adults, they say, hey, oh, you have a mass, fine, just go do biopsy in 3 weeks. And then the biopsy will come back like in a month. And then, hey, we'll treat you in 3 months. I don't know why. In pediatric, you have like a disease today. Usually in 2 days, sometimes if you need a biopsy, it's gonna take a little bit. But in a week or 2 max, you are definitely a treatment. Definitely, there's no way.
I feel like you were sitting in that room with me in Boston, because that was the conversation that we had. Now, I was a very naive 14-year-old. I didn't know what the tumor was. You know, I thought I pulled ligaments like my dad, and literally to sit in that room with my surgeon and the social worker and my parents. And literally my doctor said, Julie does have cancer. It's Ewing sarcoma, which is a rare form of bone cancer. And this is what we're going to do for her. And this was on a Wednesday, and we need to start treatment on a Friday. What?
Right.
And you can't hear when I only did 4 full cycles of chemo and I stopped, so they added 2.5 more weeks of radiation onto me, which is, I think, why, my leg is the way it is, but I'm grateful because I still have my leg. But to finish my treatments December 9th, 1984, and to hear my doctor say, most likely I won't live to see my birthday in February, it's shocking, and so every year to call my oncologist and say, yeah, it's my birthday, it's just amazing. I've gone through a lot since then, after that 30-year mark, but yeah, you are right. Hearing that news, which you have to deliver, but to us, it's like you stop kind of hearing everything. And then it's like the treatment plan, which is overwhelming. And I mean, you deal with pediatrics, you know how it is to have someone lose their hair and be sick all the time and freezing cold. It's so hard. I just commend you for the work that you do, and I thank you for it.
Thank you so much. But again, at the end, however, treatment, like, hey, day one, it's pretty heavy. It didn't change. It's still the same. 30 years ago, it's still the same. Heavy, tons of information. We have to deliver it because we have to start treatment. But then once we start to get better, right? So, hey, we started the chemo, we took the tumor out, we are now doing another round of chemo, for example, and we're at the end, scans are reassuring. That is the time. Hey, we're now kind of done with the tumor. You remember what I told you in day one? They will say definitely not. Right? And so now we'll get back to that, right? Let's go back. Let's look at these long-term side effects. And this is what we have to keep looking for our next whatever years, right? So yes, definitely knowledge is a little bit of a problem in the pediatric cancer population, but we're trying our best.
Well, thank you to all of you that have been willing to share today. I think I'll be processing the information of today for a long time. And all I'll say is stay tuned, because you may or may not hear these voices again in the Living Beyond Cancer podcast series. So Dr. Badawi doesn't know, but we might be hearing his voice too, if he'll agree to it. So Abby, I will turn it over to you to close this out. But thank you so much to all of you. It's been a heartwarming couple hours.
Thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited. I think this has gone really well. Again, this is our first sort of dip into childhood cancer, which I think needed to happen. I think this has gone really well. And Quality of Life Subcommittee, who pulled all of these people together. I think we like covered the spectrum, and I think this is really great. So whoever is up next, we're passing the torch to you. Who's up next? Prevention. Prevention is the next. Early detection. We're passing the torch. Early detection. Can you do it? So we're going to end today with a subcommittee report out, and then we'll close. I have a little bit of information I want to share after everyone gives their report out. So who wants to go first? What subcommittee wants to go first? Annette, raise your hand.
Yes, Prevention Subcommittee. We had a great discussion today, and Juliana shared with us different things in the legislature related to tobacco. And anyway, several of the bills, such as one, Dr. DeCubo put forth a bill to limit or to put something against people smoking in the car with minors. So it's still got a way to go, but it can definitely hopefully do some good prevention work. And then let's see, we talked about, and then Juliana shared with us, and I'll share with everybody else, information related to the Putnam County Board of Health, possibly reducing their clean indoor air regulations. So anyway, they have a meeting later this month, and when I get everybody's email addresses, I will send that information out because they could use letters of support from different organizations. We talked about, Elizabeth shared with us her Walk with Ease program that she's working on related to the nutrition and physical activity aspect of it. We talked about sun safety, talked about the radon kits that Mountains of Hope purchased that are going to be taken on the road to distribute by Andy and you, Abby.
I'm gonna interrupt that really quickly. So we haven't purchased anything yet. We are looking for the place to go to purchase them. If anyone has any information about where you buy them in bulk very cheaply and wants to pass that along to us, go right ahead.
Okay, great. You guys, as soon as you get them, which is hopefully soon, you'll be able to go on the road with them. We talked about HPV vaccination, and a few years ago, I don't know who remembers this, Jim reminded us that there were PSAs that were broadcast about kids getting HPV shots. So anyway, we're going to see if we can find information about that so we can maybe get those going again, because we think those would be very timely. And that's an overview.
Okay, thanks, Annette. Early detection.
Hi, so I'm doing early detection, and let's see, we talked about, just a quick report, our lung cancer screening event it was held in October through December 2019, 2021, and we had a report with over 300 people screened for that event. This year, we had 4 screening sites. In the past, we'd had a couple more, but it was really challenging this year with COVID. A lot of sites weren't able to participate just because of COVID protocols and things like that. So we were pleased with, considering COVID and the pandemic and how busy healthcare professionals are right now. We were pleased with that result, and we'll continue to work on that. Let's see. And as Stephanie Kennedy raised, she sent out an email. Lung cancer work is so important because as a state, we're still diagnosing 74% of lung cancer with regional or distant metastasis. So these screening events give us a real shot at changing this population-based metric. We also talked a lot about, we have our Ribbons of Faith event that we are working on, and we have secured All Saints Church, which is in Bridgeport, for the event. In the past, we've done 2 separate sessions over Zoom. This year, our plan is to host the event at All Saints Church in Bridgeport, May 17th, for a one-day, all-day event. We have over 400 email contacts, and Jenny Austin's keeping those nice and organized for us. So we are planning on sending out a save the date hopefully within the next month, and we'll continue to do so to get participants. One thing that came up that we think is really important is we plan to update or edit the Ribbons of Faith program so that it's more inclusive of different religions and different viewpoints, different spiritualities. So we are working with the original group who created it based on their data, and they will approve our changes. And one other thing, this is relatively new that we talked about, the Pink and Pearl Toolkit. That is modeled from the work in Tennessee. And that initiative the goal is to bring awareness to both breast and lung cancer. And in early detection, we've of course talked a lot about those two groups of cancers, those two populations. So we are considering sort of hosting or working on that initiative for next year, and Summer's already given us some great resources. So we had a really great meeting today too. Ginny's doing a fantastic job with leadership, and our group's been really active.
And I just want to piggyback real quick because I don't want you to undersell your lung cancer work, because there's some data there that I did some analysis on. So just so you guys know, with one of the 4 sites that they worked with, they've increased their screenings by 33.8% since 2019. Another increased their screenings by 86.4% since 2019. And then another cancer screening site, they increased their screening by 38.2% since 2020. So the key thing with this site is actually their screening rates went down dramatically during 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're just now getting back to their baseline screening rates from 2019. And so it's really encouraging to see them returning back to that after, the last couple of years we've had. So, yes, it's definitely one of those things that didn't have as many partners participate with us this year, but it is so exciting to see these sites and to see that percentage increase among them. And so I just want to make sure that you guys know just how amazing the work you've done has been.
And Summer, let me on to that for them is that it's not this program that they've been doing. This is not just about screening. We're also training. So, and I don't have the numbers on me right now, but we've also trained a lot of people, and it's helped us get in the door where we wouldn't have been able to get in the door to train previously. So, it's a 2-pronged effort. Getting the information out to the providers is just as important as actually screening patients, because we still have so many providers that aren't as aware as they should be. And it is complicated. I would venture to say it's the most complicated of the screening cancers that we currently have. So they're doing great stuff.
Yep.
I'm going to hand over quality of life.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Let me take this.
Carrie or Angela?
Hi, everyone. First, I want to say a quick thank you to all the presenters today. I learned a lot, and I really thoroughly enjoyed this morning, but also thank you to Andy for all the behind the scenes work. Fantastic job. Speaking to one of the presenters today, one of the things Quality of Life is working on currently is the Oral Health and Cancer Rights Act that Shelley did a fantastic job of presenting today, and all of the work that she does on that act and getting the work that is necessary in that department. She did a great job of explaining it today, and we talked about it briefly in our subcommittee breakout as well. We're also working on something called Growing Hope, where we're working with local farmers to supply vouchers to patients so that they would be able to receive meal packs through their local hospital and go and fill that voucher at the local hospital. Once we'll have more information on that once growing season hits. And lastly, we also talked about our cancer resource guide, which Abby and Zach are always doing a great job updating and keeping that information very current on the Mountains of Hope website. So check out, if you haven't already, the Cancer Resource Guide. It's a great source of information for all our patients and families out there in the community.
Thank you, Angela. And I just want to, and before we end, I want everyone to know who doesn't know, we are the NUPA group. I think you've probably heard us talk about the NUPA group. Back before COVID, we agreed to apply for an opportunity with American Cancer Society to do an intensive workshop in person in Atlanta. Then COVID happened. And so we did an online training workshop, and then over the last year have worked on various projects related to nutrition, physical activity, and cancer survivors. What we ended up doing is we were able to report on all of the work that we're doing across the subcommittee. So all the subcommittees are doing something to promote nutrition and physical activity with cancer survivors in some way or another. I'm gonna, as soon as Summer is done sharing this, in preparing for this project, we found, I knew that they did this. I knew prevention did this work. Quality of life started the work, made a connection with Mountaineer Food Bank, and then prevention got more into this work. And they used their funds. Can you guys see this slide? They used their funds to print the cookbook, Good Food Cheap. And I didn't realize that they did this many, because I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention to what's going on, but they gave away out 600 cookbooks, but with those cookbooks, they did surveys. So they surveyed people and they asked a whole bunch of questions, not just the ones you see in front of you. But they were very jarring to me because they're what I've felt and been saying for years. And now there's data to back it up. So of the recipients, of the almost 600 people that were surveyed, 29% that go to that food bank, fully employed. They were fully employed people and they need a food bank. 50% of them, 50% receive WIC or SNAP or both, and they still need to go to the food bank. 66% of them are women. And I know that prevention is working on something else with Copeland Clinic. Shelley informed me. This little map right here shows the county that the cookbooks were distributed in, and how many in each county that they went to. This is a phenomenal partnership, an inroad that they've created with Mountaineer Food Bank, which is pretty much statewide. And I would like us in the future to work more towards this. So I just really wanted to toot their horn, because when and there's more data, but when you really start to dig into this data, it's very surprising. And I just wanted everyone to sort of see this. And I'm gonna come knocking on prevention's door soon, because I think we should get into this a little bit more. Thank you everyone for coming. Do we need Andy, Summer, anything else that we need to send them off with?